Hello, my name is Erin McFall, and tonight's date is October 8th, 2023, and tonight we will be discussing the skeletal system together. So I have this little skeleton diagram that I will be using to help as a visual aid in this lesson, and then I also have a sheet of paper with the names of bones to keep myself on track while I am going through this presentation. So before we get into specific bones and specific skeletal systems, I would like to give a basis on what the skeletal system actually is. So the skeletal system is also known as the musculoskeletal system, and it has 4 components. So starting off, as we can see here, one of the main components of the skeletal system is, of course, the bones. The bones are going to be really important. They provide a rigid framework for the entire body, and without it, the body wouldn't really have any structure or nothing to connect things to. Next we have cartilage, which is found in various spots, and it is in certain joints so that it can act as a soft cushion and there won't be any friction between the bones as movement is happening. And next we have the ligaments, which are going to be the things that connect a bone to another bone. And then lastly, we have tendons, which is really important. It is how the bones are connected to the muscles. So that is how the bones and the muscles come together and form the musculoskeletal system. So those are the 4 really key parts of the skeletal system. And to continue on, we are going to discuss how different bones are classified, and it's usually based on their shape. So whenever we look a little more closely into this figure, we can see that not all the bones look very similar. There are different shapes and sizes and all kinds of stuff like that. So that is how we are able to classify these different bones. So to start off, we have long bones. So visually on this diagram, we have long bones. So we can find those in our legs and in our arms. And it is important to note that these bones are longer than they are wide. So, that is a way to remember that these bones are called long bones because they physically look long. Next, we have on the opposite end of the spectrum and connected to the long bones are the short bones. And they're typically cube shaped. If I take this guy off of his little stand, I can bring him closer. And you can see that they're typically cube shaped and they're pretty small. And they can be found in the wrists and ankles. And those are called tarsals and carpals and tarsals, excuse me. Next, we have flat bones. So if we look a little bit closer on this guy, we can see that the sternum and the ribs are flat seemingly. These are a little bit more circular and round, but these are flat. So defined on their shape, these are categorized as flat bones. Next, we have irregular bones. These are kind of bones that don't fit into the categories listed before this. And this is going to be the vertebrae. The vertebrae is an example of an irregular bone. And as you can see, it doesn't quite look like any of the other bones. And it is quite spiky and nothing that it can be compared to any of the other bones. Lastly, which we can find on the head here is sutural bones. Sutural bones are kind of bones that can be pieced together, kind of like a puzzle, and they're found here on the head. They're mostly small and they're mostly flat, but it is very important to look and see how they connect to know that they are sutural. So now that we have a pretty good baseline on the skeletal system and the different types or the different categories of bones, we can go into all of the different systems. So to get started, we're going to talk about the cranium, which is the skull, and there are 7 cranial bones. So to start off, we see the suture line up here. The frontal bone is going to be the bone in front of the suture line. These 2 bones right here on the either sides of the suture line are the parietal bones. If we swing around the back, this is going to be the occipital bone. Then right underneath the parietal bones are going to be the temporal bones. There's one on each side, and we can think of that as we rub our temples when we have a headache. You go a little bit down, you can see the indention for the sigmoid bone, and right through the eyeballs, you can also see the indention of the ethmoid bone. My skeleton skull actually comes out, so you can see the indentions of within the skull, but that is just an overview of the cranial bones. It is important to note as we go on to the axial skeleton, all of the cranial bones are part of the axial skeleton. So to move on to the axial skeleton, all of the bones mentioned that are the cranial bones. Then move a bit down and we have the facial bones. So to start off with, the jawbone is called the mandible. To move up a little bit more, right here above the teeth is the maxilla. Through the nose, we have an indention line that you can see, and that is called the vomer bone. And then these bones that protrude in the face is going to be called the zygomatic bones. And lastly, right around here and on his upper nose is going to be the nasal bone. So that is all the facial bones, and to stay in the same region and to finish up the bones of the head in the axial system, we're going to have the auditory ossicles, which is all of the ear bones. And it is interesting to note that the smallest bone in the human body is in the ear. To wrap up, we have the ribs and the sternum. That is also part of the axial system. And we have the entire vertebral column. So the first 7 are going to be the cervical. So this is the cervical vertebrae, the thoracic vertebrae, which is 1 through 12, and then the lumbar, which is going to be 1 through 5. And to finish this off, we have the sacrum and we have the coccyx. And this is all part of the axial system once again. And that is going to be it for the bones in the axial system. To go on, we will wrap up with the appendicular system. And when we think of the word appendage, we can think of our appendages, so our arms and our legs, and basically whatever we have not mentioned previously. So to start off, I'm going to mention that this is called the clavicle, and this is called the scapula. So these 2 bones make up the pectoral girdle. So whenever we think of pecs, that is the framework of that. We're going to go on to the arms. So this is called the humerus. And then on the thumb side is called the radius. And on the pinky side, this bone is the ulna. Then to the wrist and hands, we have the carpals, the metacarpals, and then the fingers are the phalanges. Before we move on to the legs, we should talk about the pectoral girdle. So, not the pectoral girdle, I'm so sorry, the pelvic girdle. So this is going to be our hip bones. The hips are called the ilium, and that is right around here. And then what is protruding is called the iliac crest. We have the pubis right around here. And then the ischium is going to be this bone that leads into the pubis. So that is the pelvic girdle, and that is all part of the appendicular system. And then to wrap up, we have the legs. So this is going to be the femur. The knee bone is called the patella. The big toe side bone is going to be called the tibula, and then the pinky toe side bone is the fibula. Then we have the tarsals, the metatarsals, and then the toes at the end are the phalanges. So that is all of the skeletal systems and their bones, and I hope that was helpful. Thank you so much.